Hi, I'm Leah Hurwich Adler from Apollo GraphQL, and I'm here to share with you today the secrets to graph success from inception to general availability. The secrets I share with you today are hard-earned learnings from previous experiences across multiple different tech transformations. While I apply them to a GraphQL platform journey, I hope that you can use them not just for GraphQL, but for additional transformations you may lead as well. My goal is for you to walk away with best practices to expedite your graph adoption, no matter what stage you might be. Hopefully, from my presentation, you'll be able to articulate best practices to establish trust and garner support. You'll have a framework to map your own graph adoption journey, and you'll have a concrete example of how to apply best practices at different stages within your graph maturity. So before we actually start on what the keys to success are, let's take a minute to define what do we mean by success. Dr. Brené Brown, a known sociologist, said that we love to believe we are rational, thinking people who on occasion feel some emotion. Everything we know about who we are as people neurobiologically points to one thing, and that is we are emotional, feeling beings who on occasion think. Platforms are usually long-term investments. While it is crucial to make sure that there's measurable value coming from your platform, frequently you need to actually garner support before you see those results. It's therefore really important that throughout your journey, you think about delivering on both perceived value and measurable value. Perceived value is how people feel about the graph, how people feel about the value that your platform is creating for them. Platforms should make people's jobs easier. They should solve real life problems, and they should make people less concerned about doing their jobs well or help them do their jobs better than they ever could before. Measurable value frequently comes from this perceived value. It's ways that we can help as platforms to reduce operational costs. And it's also ways to improve business outcomes, drive better performance, drive greater stability, drive better results for the websites and native apps that we might be supporting. To be able to know the difference, you need to understand your organization's needs for which is perceived and which is measurable value, which brings us to the 4 keys to driving successful graph adoption. The first key is to know your users. By understanding your users' pain points and the problems that they face, you can better prioritize your work to address the most acute user pain points first. You can also craft messaging that will resonate more with them because you understand what it is that they're looking for. Regardless of user sentiment, you're going to need senior support to prioritize graph adoption and devote resources to help build out your platform. Don't be afraid to aim high when trying to engage leadership. It's really important, especially in top-down organizations, that the heads of different organizations truly believe that graph can be a solution to the problems that they're facing. At a bare minimum, you should make sure that you understand the concerns of management and leadership chains of teams who want to partner with you to help drive your graph. This will reduce friction for your early adopters and help you get faster learnings through tighter partnerships across organizations. In addition to understanding users and leadership needs, you have to make sure you can speak the same language. To that end, set clear expectations. Be sure you don't talk past each other by making it really, really clear what you expect to get from your users and what your users can expect to get from your platform. This is one of the most important keys to delivering perceived value. A strong platform that falls short of what others expect may actually generate less perceived value than a more fragile platform that exceeds expectations of people who started using it. Remember that you need people to really be bought in to what it is that you're driving and feel like you were able to deliver to truly be seen as a great platform team. Now, all of this takes time. Even if you deliver perfectly on the above, recognize that it always takes time and effort to help people learn or see things differently. You must be patient to see your journey through. Now that you have all the keys, let's actually apply these principles to a way this played out in a real-world example. In my example, I'll talk about my experiences at Wayfair, a leading home goods retailer and Fortune 500 company. At the time of the GraphQL adoption that I helped drive, the company had over 2,000 engineers working on websites and native apps that served hundreds of millions of daily visitors across multiple geographies. So, what did Wayfair's journey actually look like, and how do these principles come into play throughout that experience? Our federation journey began because Wayfair had a clear and urgent need to update its tech stack and best practices. In understanding our users, people were interested in already using GraphQL in the monolith. Despite this interest, there was not a lot of expertise. Many applications did not leverage GraphQL-specific compositional architecture or caching strategies. Graph APIs regularly mirrored backend data models. Such patterns negatively impacted endpoint performance, leaving many speculative of the value of GraphQL across the business. In addition to our user concerns about how to use GraphQL, leadership was very concerned about the general velocity of our developers at Wayfair. Wayfair was operating in a very large PHP monolith. The monolith was so unwieldy, we hit a ceiling on our velocity. Hiring more engineers did not actually help push more code to production. We needed to fundamentally change the way we build software and continue to scale the business. The CTO therefore mandated that we needed to move to a microservices-based architecture. This is where we knew Federation could create great value and how we began our journey to GraphQL Federation adoption across the organization. The beginning of our journey started by trying to understand what was the ideal design for Wayfair to be able to successfully create a graph and a federated graph ecosystem. Before getting dedicated resources, we need to validate that Federation would work and meet all the different organizations' needs. To this end, we created 2 Tiger teams. The first was a group of ICs from different areas of the organization tasked with building an initial gateway implementation. The second was a group of senior architects from similar diverse organizations who worked together to define the ideal architecture of Wayfair's graph. By using such a diverse set of people who would eventually be contributing back to the graph within their organizations, we're able to get a really good sense of whether or not our proposed solution would work across the organizations that would again be contributing back. Funding Tiger teams, though, required buy-in from senior leaders and allocating time towards this project. To make sure that we had senior leader support for the Tiger teams, we worked with them to understand what the teams were going to deliver and how their investment was going to help. This meant setting very clear expectations for exactly what we could do with the given resources we had. The most important expectation we set was that to implement Federation would require a cultural change in how teams think about best practices in API design. Teams would need to make a non-trivial upfront investment in learning Federation best practices if we wanted our graph to be fast and resilient. Ultimately, demonstrating the capabilities of the graph while articulating the limitations paid off. We received funding to create a GraphQL platform team and invest in building a graph ecosystem with the foundational platform, developer tooling, and community touchpoints needed to prepare for general availability. This meant preparing from going from a locked ecosystem we could control to an open ecosystem where we had less influence. Our primary customers during this phase were a select group of pilots we used to pressure test our platform. We worked side by side with these pilots to deliver their desired business outcomes. This demonstrated value of our platform through the significant business wins we delivered, and also ensured that our platform education materials met our users' needs. We provided regular updates for our pilots' leadership chain and those we engaged during the design phase of the platform's progress and wins, so they understood the value of contributing a longer journey. This helped secure buy-in even when challenges arose. We also used this to expand our network, ensuring senior managers and influencers and adjacent and partnering teams so the positive outcomes that their colleagues could generate by using our graph and Federation. In this stage, it was really important for us to set clear expectations with pilot teams that just as we would contribute to their business outcomes, we expected them to help contribute back to the platform and larger GraphQL community. They provided us with valuable feedback to help us shape our strategy and shape our tooling and developer experiences. And they also helped us expand scope by contributing directly to the platform and becoming subject matter experts to drive larger community understanding of GraphQL best practices. Many members of pilot teams became critical parts of our GraphQL governance strategy and our ability to make sure that we were delivering a performant graph no matter which part of the organization that we were working with. As we built out tools and felt comfortable, that we were ready for general availability, we then launched a generally available single unified supergraph. This was a great moment because general availability allowed us to unlock greater value than ever before. It was also a scary moment because suddenly we no longer had direct control over what people were contributing to our ecosystem. To that end, we relied on Slack channels, office hours, casual chats, and lots of feedback from graph governance bodies to understand how the community was progressing, what we could do to make sure that we were prioritizing the things that were most applicable to our users' needs. People's feedback also provided concrete examples we could use or teams we could work with to validate new features or next steps in our larger platform strategy. We would publish regular updates to inform leadership of graph adoption and positive business outcomes once we reached general availability. Continuing to demonstrate in this way that the team was worth the investment through our ability to scale and deliver results helped continue to drive that positive support from very senior leaders within the organization. Finally, to continue to grow the ecosystem, we worked to empower users while still maintaining that we were an opinionated platform team. We leaned on our community to help others onboard and contribute to questions. And we also led a larger graph governance program and invested in tooling such as linting pipelines to ensure that the company maintained a universal set of best practices across the supergraph. This was really important to us, knowing where we started, knowing how things could go. We wanted to make sure that GraphCo was always seen as high value, even once it reached general availability. Walking this line, relying on our users to help with disseminating best practices while still also enforcing things like linting in our platform really enabled us to make people feel empowered while still making sure that they understood the best practices that we needed to drive success in our graph that is a single unified graph for a larger company. The results of our efforts paid off. After 2 years, the federated router handled 220 million daily requests across over 80 subgraphs in a highly performant way. While this was a huge success, it's easy to talk in hindsight about how such the success was a linear process. We had a start, we had a design, we had a rollout, and then we hit general availability, and everything seemed to go magically. In reality, that was not actually the case. There were a lot of ups and downs throughout the process, and it was really important for us to ride those ups and downs and continue to iterate and generate learnings as we saw things both succeed and sometimes miss their ideal mark. Learning takes time. If you're going to launch any sort of major tech transformation, we learned that you have to keep iterating and play the long game to actually make sure that you can achieve your desired outcome. As an example, we went through 4 different proposals over the span of 1 year before we were able to get alignment around how we would implement graph governance. We explored 3 different proposals for how to structure our actual super graph, and it took us 2 whole years from when we first began building our GraphQL gateway to when we reached general availability of our platform. Even within that time frame, it became clear that people needed to experience certain issues rather than investing in avoiding them entirely to learn what it was that they needed to learn to contribute to the platform. What we realized was through all of these different experiences, being patient and making sure that we had the time to deliver the right results didn't mean passively waiting. It meant hustling and hustling hard so people understood the wins that we were generating throughout the entire process. We would celebrate small wins and we would take credit for how our graph contributed to user success stories to make sure people understood the value of what it was we were delivering at any given point within that journey. If it didn't land the first time, we would try again in a different way. We were continually retelling our story and continually working with folks to make sure that they understood the value of each piece that we were building and how that value would help them within their own experiences. One of our most effective frameworks for building momentum and creating greater buy-in across the organization was our stakeholder squares. The stakeholder squares came to be over the course of multiple different tech transformations that we had run, where we learned and saw frequently that while many assumed more senior engineers or senior stakeholders would be more effective at actually learning and driving adoption of different technical transformations, We found it was really the most enthusiastic and excited people who were just generally curious about those technologies, who were the workhorses of different technical transformations. Knowing this and seeing this play out across multiple different journeys, we were able to create these stakeholder squares, where every time we spoke to someone, we thought about both how interested they were in GraphQL and Federation as a technology, as well as their proficiency with GraphQL and Federation. And by taking both of these different factors, we could then better tailor our messaging to help them understand how to contribute back to our experience and how to use the platform that we were building to drive their own experiences and their own products. When introducing change, most people started as skeptical novices. With the skeptical novice group, you have a short window of attention with this group, so you want to keep the communications very high level. We would put a lot more time into why and focus on explaining the value of the graph to help turn skeptics into believers. We would give a very high level of what, and we would also make sure that they really, really could drive why it was important for them based off of the details that we were giving them of what Federation was. Through this work and through focusing on the why and focusing on the value, we're able to convert skeptical novices into enthusiastic novices, people who were excited about the graph and wanted to make sure that they could contribute and learn more about how best to use it to meet their needs. Other examples of enthusiastic novices throughout the process were people who wanted to be on our Tiger teams or were already using GraphQL at the company before we started our journey. With this group, we had a wrapped audience. This led us to focus and spend more time on best practices and explaining how to use GraphQL to then develop subject matter experts, also known as our enthusiastic experts. The enthusiastic experts were the most powerful tools we had to influence others. Their passion user testimonies could convince others of the value of GraphQL Federation, ways that would sound disingenuous from coming from our platform team. Fostering such champions helped us cover a lot more ground and effectively advocate for our graph, even when we weren't in the room. Skeptical experts, we found, were the absolute hardest group to convince. They understood the value of Federation, and yet they still thought, for whatever reason, it wasn't a good solution for the organization. Knowing we had a limited amount of time, we didn't focus our efforts on converting members of this group unless they supported important strategic positions in the graph. We found that as we generated more wins and created more enthusiastic experts throughout the org, it was the other experts who became effective advocates for converting skeptical experts into enthusiasts. When people who didn't initially believe in Federation saw that it generated wins for their friends, they were much more amenable to take a second look and contribute to the supergraph, no longer remaining blockers for our platform growth. With everyone on board, we suddenly had the keys to organizational success at both perceived levels as well as measurable levels. We were able to drive value by understanding our users, engaging leaders, setting clear expectations, and being patient as we slowly worked to help people understand the value of what it was we were driving and how we were going to be driving that. I hope through this presentation that you too have a few ideas for how you can apply such methods to your own transformation, delivering on both perceived and measurable success for your own graph adoption journeys.